Spiced rib cast with homemade chimichurri. Let's go.
So the first thing I'm going to do here is make a spice rub for the steaks. Now on these steaks, I decided to go with a quick rub that consisted of some chili powder, some smoked paprika, some dried chipotle chili, some ancho chili powder, some granulated garlic and onion, a little cayenne pepper, and of course salt and pepper to taste. Now you could just use salt and pepper here, as I oftentimes do, but I really like the way the smokiness and the little bit of heat pairs with the chimichurri I'm serving these with, and I highly recommend that you try it. Now anytime you make a spice rub, you're going to want to make sure that you taste it and adjust it to your taste. Too little or too much salt, for example, will ruin these steaks, especially if you don't use enough. Undersalted food sucks. Now for the steaks themselves today, I chose ribeye caps, which are one of my very favorite cuts. They're more flavorful than the center of the ribeye, and they're more tender than a filet mignon. These melt-in-your-mouth cuts are actually just the spinalis, or the outer part of a ribeye, tied into a circular steak. So they're super simple to prepare these. You just take them out of the package, pat them dry with some paper towels, and then season very generously with your spice rub, or just salt and pepper if you prefer. From here, you could take your steaks and put them directly on the grill or in a pan, or reverse sear, or whatever your preferred cooking method is to bring the steaks to your desired degree of doneness. But because these are super thick and rolled together with string, they're pretty difficult to cook evenly, so I'm going to use a sous vide on them. This will be delicious whichever way you cook your steaks, but sous vides are relatively affordable these days, and they're worth buying for cooking thick steaks alone. Not to mention they're so damn easy and idiot-proof, you can just set it and forget it and never have to worry about overcooking your guest steaks ever again. So if you do have one, go ahead and season your meat, vacuum seal it, and set your sous vide around 5 to 8 degrees below where you want the final temperature, which for me, I went for 127, which as you'll see after searing ended up in a perfect medium rare. Either way, drop your steak in and leave them in there for about 2 hours for a 2-inch thick steak. Now these steaks are going to be absolutely delicious, but they are very, very rich. So I'm making one of my absolute favorite condiments that really cuts some of the richness of the steak, chimichurri. Now there are a ton of different variations on ways to make chimichurri, and I've tried a lot of them, and I've found that there's not really a bad way, it's just personal preference. So I'll leave the recipe for what I did in the video description, but what you're going to need is some fresh herbs of your choice, among which oregano must be included. You can use either fresh or dried, some oil, some vinegar, and some garlic. Now here I'm making a simple version with about equal parts of parsley and cilantro, some fresh oregano. Dried is also acceptable, like I said, but I had some fresh laying around and I usually prefer it. I'm also using a few cloves of garlic and adding a pinch of crushed red pepper. Usually if I have a fresh chili laying around, I'll use that instead of the crushed red pepper, like a Fresno chili or something along those lines, but I didn't happen to have one. The last thing you need to do is finally mince everything together and add it to a bowl and cover it with about 2 parts oil to 1 part vinegar. What kind of each you use is up to you. Now, I'm going to go with red wine vinegar, which is pretty traditional, although you could sub white wine vinegar or even just a regular white vinegar would work. And lastly, for the oil. Now, I prefer a high-quality extra virgin olive oil in my chimichurri. This is also very good with a neutral flavored oil like avocado. Again, you can make this any of these ways and it's going to be delicious. No way that I've found seems right or wrong. Just use what you have and adjust the ratios to your personal taste. This is a time, though, where if you do choose to use olive oil, the quality of your oil that you use is going to make a massive difference in outcome. If you're using cheap store-brand olive oil, I'd recommend just using something neutral tasting instead. Lastly, and most importantly, I've been saying this whole time here that there's no wrong way to make chimichurri, and as I'm narrating this, I am realizing just now that that's not true. I do occasionally see recipes out there that call for blending chimichurri. Blending chimichurri is the only wrong way to make chimichurri. There's a lot of reasons for that I plan on talking about in a future video, but the point is, just chop your herbs by hand. It takes a couple minutes and the results are so drastically better. Don't believe me? Make this recipe, put it in a blender or food processor, chop it, taste them side by side. There's a world of difference. It only takes a couple minutes. Don't be lazy. Now from there, make sure you season your chimi to taste with salt and set aside at room temperature for at least 1 hour to let the flavors meld and infuse the oil with all of their earthy deliciousness. So fast forward a couple of hours and our steaks are done. All we have to do at this point is retrieve them from their bags, pat them down with paper towels until they're as dry as possible, and reseason them lightly with a touch of the leftover spice rub before finishing either over a ripping hot charcoal fire or in a cast iron pan just for 30 seconds to a minute or so aside, depending on your heat source, or just until a beautiful brown crust is formed on the outside. Now, as a general rule, I top all of my steaks with a nice fat pat of high-quality grass-fed butter and let them rest for about 10 minutes before cutting the string off, slicing, and finishing with a sprinkling of finishing salt. then dipping in the chimichurri, and holy cow, did we nail this one. I mean, I really can't oversell this dish. The steak is rich, it's beefy, it's melt in your mouth tender. It's cooked perfectly medium rare from edge to edge because of the sous vide. It's got a nice spice from the rub and a beautiful smokiness from being seared over the natural lump charcoal. The chimichurri is so refreshing, and its earthiness and acidity work to offset the richness of the steak and make this an eating experience second to very few you'll ever have at home. Place it up next to your favorite side dish or just eat the whole thing family style off the cutting board like we did here. Enjoy!
Let's go.